Okay.
To Lexy and Brian, thank you for coming.
Okay, cool. I will just get started. Thank you everybody for joining this workshop. Essentially, I'm going to hand over to Brian from the comms team pretty much straight away. He's going to go through a presentation with a bunch of information, and then after that, we'll take some time for questions and answers. Yeah, so take it away, Brian.
Hello, yes, I'm Brian, or the Brain, nickname given to me by Travis, the previous comms lead, as a spelling mistake rather than a statement of ability. I'm part of the comms team. They're my colleagues Tim and Faisal. I think Tim's in on this meeting as well. And one of our roles is obviously to support the organisation, but another important aspect of our role is to support the creative community with their comms to do the thing that they want to do. So we've just put together a little presentation. I hope it won't take too long and be too boring. And then there's room for questions at the end if you need to, or you can ask questions at another time. So are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are.
Yes, cool, great. So as Tim reminded me today, we're very close to 100 days away from the thing we do in the desert. And it's a lot closer than we think, and I think we've all come back.
I think we've passed it, Brian. I think it's less than 100 days.
Till the clan
Anyway, go on.
I think it's 102 days until
the clan burns. Anyway,
Until I was counting until it starts. So
don't
continue.
let the truth get in the way of a good story. But either way, it's still flipping close. And so we're really here to help you with your comms, be it to the broader community as a whole. And Tim's deeply involved with what we call communications, generating support for your creative projects, helping you to ask for help from the community. More often than not, that involves a certain element of fundraising or support in other ways. And so that's what I'll try to take you through today. Again, one of my favorite photos, because more often than not, when you do a creative project for the first time, this is exactly how you feel, let alone when you're in Tanquetown. So we've got this timeline towards the end of April, and what we find as a comms department is that it's pretty quiet now with information and requests for support and comm stuff with regards to creative projects. But what we usually see is that there's this condensing as we get closer to the event. So we have a role in terms of making sure that participants know to bring fire extinguishers and water and how the toilets work or not. And we stack a lot of that information up in the month, 6 weeks to 2 months before the event. And what we find is that between February and March, it's relatively quiet, but people are starting to think about AfrikaBurn as a community. It's starting to warm up. But once you kind of get mid-March and certainly in April, it's really hard to get messaging out because we're posting 3-4 times a day about a variety of different things. There's so much happening that it makes it very difficult for messaging to get the time that it needs to land properly. And so part of this is to kind of relate to you, there's no better time than now to start telling people about your project or your intent. And yes, we'll help you all the way up to the event itself, but it's a crazy time all round, and we have noticed that sometimes messaging gets lost in the cracks because people are so focused on where they're going to find enough shade netting to camp underneath. So we've got lots of different channels within AfrikaBurn, the organization that we use. One of the main ones is the newsletter, Old and Gold. You know, it still surprises us to this day quite how popular the newsletter is, considering in online terms, everyone said email was dead 15 years ago. But what you find is that we get really, really good open rates and engagement, and people are prepared to read and click. And so often what we find is we'll send out messaging and people will get the mail and then acknowledge it, but then they might only read it a few days later. But when they do read it, they read it in a lot of depth. So it's still probably one of the most powerful tools to communicate with the community, particularly the older, over 40 folk are much more receptive to emails than the younger folk. There's all the normal social channels that are in a constant state of flux. We dropped Twitter last year because it was just such a horrible place to be. I do hope that Facebook doesn't go the same way, because they seem to own our WhatsApp and Instagram, but we're always kind of making ethical decisions about how we use social. But we're lucky in that we've got a really large engaged social media audience. So it offers really good opportunities to get projects and messaging out there, but it's got a super short attention span. You know, if nothing happens within 2 hours, then the post is dead and everyone kind of moves on. And we've got all our official channels, and there's also unofficial channels, which I'll talk to you about later on. There's also the AfrikaBurn website. It's very, very well profiled within Google search. So if people are Googling about AfrikaBurn related search terms, then the website invariably is what you will come across first before any other source. It's got a really nice long lifespan because of that. People are prepared to read a lot more on a website, but it's normally prompted off the back of a specific search for something, rather than just vegging out in front of the telly and cruising through Instagram. So it offers a kind of slightly different opportunity. There's also lots of WhatsApp groups. We don't have an official one. Josie Burners is probably one of the biggest that I know of. There's volunteer groups with multiple threads and what's happening and here and there. And they're channels that are available to us as the org, but it's one-to-one or one-to-many. So what often works better there is actually if you post it yourself rather than any one of us posting on behalf of anyone else. And the last one is word of mouth. If there's one thing I know, having been with the Burn for a while, is that gossip and rumor are probably your most powerful tools when it comes to communication. Getting something wrong or putting something contentious out there is also another phenomenal way to get the whole community to pay attention to what you're doing, and you can use that to your advantage or disadvantage. On the unofficial side, there's the AfrikaBurn group, which is totally volunteer driven, participant driven. We don't have any official role within that. There's the resource community page, there's an international burners page, there's ride and share, there's theme camps page, there's individual theme camp pages. There's like a gazillion. Tim will know better, but we did a list and there was like 40, 50 different kind of individual, unofficial AfrikaBurn channels from Lost and Found and here, there and everywhere. And some of those smaller channels are kind of deep, dark places where it almost, it's people are trying to sell dodgy tickets and stuff like that because they're really badly managed. But what you might find is that there's small groups that might be more relevant to where you want your project to be, that might offer you a better place to tell your story than the official AfrikaBurn channel. So what we normally say is, just do a bit of research first before you start getting your messages out there. So, I mean, what we try and do as an org, and I think what a lot of creative projects try and do is to build a community. That's what we're in the business of, is in community building. And again, this isn't for every creative project. Some theme camps and artworks and mutants want to build a community around them, and others don't. Some, it's quite nice if they're dark and mysterious and you don't know who they are or where they're from, or they're not even in the WTF. Did you see that thing? No, it didn't happen because you don't have an Instagram page. So there's also something quite nice about rejecting any kind of formal acknowledgement as well. And so I think that's the important, is there's kind of no fits all for every project. I think you've got to assess with your project what you want and what you want to get out of it. So a lot of people use comms to engage with concepts before the event. There's a lot of chat on Facebook groups. We're thinking of bringing this camp or that camp, and then you'll get a reaction from the community accordingly. 99 times out of 100, everyone's like, oh my God, that's the best thing. Please bring it to Tanquatown, even if it's a pancake theme camp, because you can never have enough of those. But it's really nice to kind of build a bit of energy and excitement around your idea through social media or our online channels before. If you want participation in Tanquatown, so if you want people to engage specifically with your project, so you can build up awareness of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and then you can invite people to participate with you in Tanquatown through the social channels, whether you want to get spanked or you want to have a shower, whatever, you can let people know before the event how to participate with you and what those kind of rules of engagement are. You can also recruit for support on the ground if you need people to bring things or to help out or to help set up. And then, as well as the kind of post-event community building. If you're building a project that's a once-off, it's probably not for you, but a lot of projects we find repeat. You get a bit of Tanqua dust and get all excited, and right, next year we're going to bring 10 mutant vehicles instead of 1. But you want to build a community to be able to do that and support you to do that. So it doesn't just kind of end as soon as we all go home afterwards. There's that kind of opportunity to build a community after the event. And so what we find nowadays is that lots of creative projects will start their own social media channels and profiles, and those might be theme camps, artworks, mutants, anything, even internal departments. The Rangers have got a social channel, Radio Free Tanqua's got a social channel. There's lots of different social profiles there, and we encourage this because it's really nice to see that variety, and it really kind of paints the whole overall picture of what happens in Tanquatown. And it's also quite nice because it's an opportunity for people to also play and have fun with social media. A lot of kind of camps kind of default to trying to do what everyone else does and tries and posts pictures of people having fun, and it's great to help us in terms of telling other people about AfrikaBurn and making it look really glossy and exciting. Maybe it's slightly different from the reality, but I think we really encourage people to play and be anarchistic and subvert what these channels are for when they're kind of building a community around them. We only really pay attention to it once we're mentioned, or if we're tagged in something and then it kind of pops up on our radar. And one kind of important thing is just that you're your own project as a standalone, and that you might list yourself as a theme camp at AfrikaBurn. That's great, but you're not an AfrikaBurn theme camp or an official AfrikaBurn camp. And so you just got to be careful that you don't pretend to be AfrikaBurn the organization, because when you're having fun and subverting social media and pushing people's buttons and being rude and cheeky, that then people might think it's me and Tim or Faisal rather than you, and then they're going to come and complain to us. So just there's always just that kind of line, and it's the right line, because then you're autonomous. You set your own tone, you speak the way you speak, you do what you want to do. You don't need to necessarily worry about us. But as soon as you do mention us, then we start to worry about you. Here's some examples I plucked. Mbombo, the giant mutant, has been running a social channel for a while. They use it to recruit camp members, share all sorts of different types of media. My personal favorite aspects of it is when you see them doing the hard work behind the scenes, building the thing, and that gives them credibility as an organization. The temptation is just to show all the glossy photos of everyone having fun, but it's actually quite nice to see the whole project as it comes together. And you build respect and admiration for those crews that are able to share that story. Another very good example is the Tree of Stories. They started their socials a while ago, and it was really nice to follow their story, and their Instagram feed has almost become a kind of time capsule of their project, from those kind of initial drawings to when it was set on fire and burned. And so again, just like a nice example of kind of projects documenting their journey, documenting their process as they go along the way. A polite note for sound camps is just that what we see is that some sound camps start really promoting themselves in the run-up to the event, and like publishing lineups and things like that. And that is where it becomes very challenging for us, because we won't share those posts at all. We won't engage with them, because there aren't any headline acts at AfrikaBurn, as we all know. And it's that kind of, and it's really, again, the social should be used to build a community of participants at all levels, rather than, performers, I suppose, would be kind of how we would position it. And a lot of what you find with a lot of sound camps is also that DJs get more excitable than the sound camps themselves, and then they start promoting themselves as well. And then then we might have to step in and say, oh, listen, please, do you mind having a word with your DJs, just to kind of tone it down, because we're very much not about knowing that Oliver is going to be DJing at midnight on Thursday at the Spirit Train, because that would then say, oh, well, I would rather go see him than someone else who you might discover, or that he's a better DJ than anyone else. That's very much contrary to how we view participation within AfrikaBurn and our principles. So yeah, just something to be cautious about.
Dig in on that one a little.
Sorry.
Can I unpack that one a little bit? Just
Yeah,
for some more
please.
clarity. Thanks, Brian. Good to see you again, by the way. And thanks for this. So needed. I really appreciate it. So, right. The main burn this year in Nevada had this really bizarre policy of either enabling people to release the list. You know what happened in Nevada, right? In Nevada this year.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So look, practically for AfrikaBurn this year, I mean, are we okay to release lineups early? If so, how early? And if we do release lineups, what's the communication that we should give to artists specifically about when and how they should release lineups? Personally, I'm with Robot Heart, what they did this year at Nevada, and they didn't release it at all, because Burning Man and AfrikaBurn is all about just showing up, and you never know who's going to play, right? That's the beauty of it. You just rock up to Oliver or somebody, right? That's the beauty of it. So can you give us a little bit more guidance? Because last year, I'd like some more guidance on that, please.
So with Burning Man, for those who don't know, the org did a bit of a turnaround and encouraged sound camps to produce their lineups and schedules. But our interpretation of this, and this is my personal interpretation, not AfrikaBurn's interpretation, was that there was linked to the lack of sale of tickets. And my personal belief was that they might have released that decision to try and generate interest from people who may be sitting on the fence in terms of buying tickets, because then they would have an idea of what performances and stuff might be there on the ground. But that's my personal,
I agree with you,
interpretation. So as a rule, and as the org, we would rather camps went the robot heart route and drummed up excitement and kept people in suspense about the amazing headline acts that are coming without naming them or giving times to it. So we're not saying don't build up the hype or excitement for your sound camp, but there's something very special about just enjoying the moment, enjoying the music or the performance for the performance sake, and not because of the perception that the DJ has played at Berghain or anywhere else around the world. So, you know, that you would enter into an AfrikaBurn experience, be like, oh, I must go there because this is the best DJ, is great in the default world, but not so good in Tankotown. The thing with this is it happens quite a bit. And so we don't necessarily have the capacity to police it or the desire. I don't want to come in and tell people, please don't do that, because it's on the border of what's acceptable. But if we bring in default world thinking, where sound camps are kind of competing against each other for audience and trying to promote themselves, like, to what end? That really is contrary to the joy of Tankotown for me. So I would encourage sound camps and DJs to subvert that process and to tell a story about how difficult it is in the default world to maintain a brand and a persona, and to subvert that and play under a pseudonym. What if Oliver played as Dave? Would he still have the same, or would he have the same fun? Maybe it would be a fantastic release for Oliver not to play as Oliver. And then he can play whatever he wants. He can play all his Bee Gees records that he always loved, but he's been forced to play desert techno for 10 years because that's what made him popular. You know, the notion of what a sound camp is and those kind of things, I think, is something really for the community to question, and particularly this kind of default world thinking. You know, it's all very snazzy and natty, and it looks like modular or whatever the clubs are in Cape Town. It's kind of slightly indistinguishable from the two, and people want that experience, and we certainly don't deny them that. But I wouldn't actively encourage it. I would actively encourage subversion and play and experimentation and art to kind of replace the notion of building a brand or an audience, is the long way around that. Sorry, on a bit of a rant.
I needed that rant. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, but I'm not, there's a lot of that happens, particularly in the week or so before the event. And there's minor DJs who are trying to build their profiles, and they're like, oh, I'm playing AfrikaBurn and stuff. And only when it becomes really overtly commercial will we then kind of step in and ask them to adjust the post or something like that. It's a real swamp, but they all kind of look the same. You know, they think they're being different. They think they're doing the right thing. But when you look at it in the context of the principles, it's not the right thing. It's default world thinking.
With you.
So when you do share stuff and you tag us and it fits in with everything, we'll always try and share it. There's no favoritism on any post or any type of project. If it comes up under our radar, when we're in all the social channels, we'll always post, try post as a story or share or like. We do occasionally get invited to collaborate on posts by projects, or people try and do kind of different tools or things depending on what the latest flavor is on Instagram. we don't like to do that, because then if we collaborate with one project, then we might have to collaborate with another. Once you've collaborated and that post is on your feed, then it can be changed or edited. You know, this post here looks quite innocent to me. It's a lovely photo of an AfrikaBurn project, but I just read your architect, Anna, and I get anxious that Anna's trying to sell her architectural services using us as a way to grab audience, whereas architecture Anna can do what she wants about AfrikaBurn on her own channels. We're not necessarily going to allow her to use our channels, because people come along and they're like, "Ooh, you've got 50,000 or whatever followers. I would really love to get my stuff out to 50,000 followers." And so, but that's not necessarily the way to do it. And if there's any hint of commercial or commodification, then we'll just skip past it and publish the next one. But we love receiving the stuff. You know, don't be afraid to tag us in stuff, and then we'll share it and build it and expand your audience as much as possible.
And is there a way we can see your calendar so we can help, we can align specific communications to your calendar so it aligns to that?
I wouldn't have an issue sharing it, but essentially we have about 2 months. We have this kind of huge list of topics, from the road to the event, water, safety. We go through all the principles, one a day. There's a lot of onboarding that needs to happen. And then Faisal, Tim and I, we split that up over the 8 weeks or so before the event, and then we'll kind of just do one post a day in the run up to stuff. But we find that people's attention really swings in the 2 weeks before. But I mean, we post once a day, probably from about February onwards, and then it'll be about twice a day from March onwards, and then about 3 times a day in April. And it's very saturated, but it's around all the things on Wikipedia, all the stuff I need to try and make sure people know before they get to Tanquetown. But if you want to reach out to me, I'll be happy to share that schedule with you, but it is a relatively loose one. What was the other one? Yeah, so another example I thought I'd bring in, just because it's a different use of media, is Run the Tanqua, which exists only as a Facebook event, rather than as an Instagram or anything else. And what I really liked about this is they do a run on Thursday morning as a participation event, and it allows then people know, because you don't necessarily know to bring your running shoes and suitable fancy dress before the event, and you might turn up and want to do the thing, but you haven't brought your runners. So it allows them to get an idea of participation at the event. And they also ask people to bring a goodie bag. So you bring a goodie bag like you would get when you sign up for any kind of race, and then you swap that and you fill it with your own goodies, and then you swap it. So you bring a goodie bag and then you take a goodie bag from someone else. It's like this nice little present gifting exercise as well. But then they also ask for people to help with support and setup and be marshals at the event. They need to make sure that they're doing this thing, that people actually turn up as well. So for a lot of people coming, they're like, right, I know Thursday morning, I want to be there at 8 o'clock to do the thing. And then I think someone set up a Strava group or other groups for next year to kind of build on that community. And it's starting to become a thing as numbers go up and they build this community around them. And so for me, that's quite a nice use of Facebook, to a Facebook event, to build participation around an event happening in Tanquetown before the event. It's like if you're sick and tired of the purple wedding that may or may not happen, you want to start the polka dot wedding, you need to tell people before that, because you can't just nip down the shops and get a polka dot frock on the Friday if the wedding's on the Saturday. So, for a lot of kind of happenings and where you're inviting participation at a particular level, it's really important to try and get that messaging out there before people get to the event site, even if it's a surprise how they're going to use it. So fundraising is the next one. If you need to fundraise to get your saunas going. So Cara, my colleague who's part of the suppliers process, about a year or so ago, wrote a really nice fundraising guide that has got a lot of detail. If you go to the website under participation, there's a fundraising drop down, and you can go there, and there's a really nice document there that gives it in more detail, and I've taken the top level here. And there's just a couple of important things. So the first is that people often say, oh, we're fundraising for AfrikaBurn. And whereas in actual fact, they're fundraising for their project, not for AfrikaBurn or to build their artwork. So it's really important to us that any fundraiser isn't confused as an AfrikaBurn fundraiser, that it's a fundraiser for your project. And the knock-on of that is that people will often try and use the AfrikaBurn signifier in their promotional material or comms to try and make it look like it's an official AfrikaBurn project, because they believe that then people will support that project more if it's recognizably AfrikaBurn based. And unfortunately, that's something that can't be done because of our strong principle of DeCommodification. Even though you're fundraising for your creative project, it's still kind of viewed through the lens of DeCommodification. And, you know, at a top level, you know, there's lots and lots of fundraisers happening throughout the year. And the ones that we see normally succeed are the ones that are unique or interesting or creative or artistic in their output. A lot of people think it's this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but it's not. It's a giant porta potty. It's people think, oh, there's just burners. They're just waiting to give money, and then what we find is that they pump and dump. So they'll do this huge big splash. Oh, this is the thing we're going to do. They spend ages and ages putting together the thing and 20 rewards and stuff, and then it goes absolutely quiet. And with any fundraiser, you know, you've got to keep working it. And so, but people they like put it out there. They don't get 100,000 Rand within 30 minutes. Then they're like, oh, fuck it, I'm going to go try something else. But the fundraiser still exists within the space of the burn. So you really have to be prepared to put in hours into a fundraiser, and a fundraiser is a commitment kind of from the beginning to the end. And so, and what sometimes happens, and this is true of fundraising anywhere, is that you've like, geez, I've spent like 3 weeks trying to fundraise and I've raised 10,000 Rand. I would have been better off spending that time doing something else, and I would have realized way more value than 10,000 Rand towards my project. So you have to kind of really look at your fundraisers objectively in terms of how much you're prepared to commit. And what we see is that, you know, where projects have kind of art and innovation and playing stuff at their core, that those are the projects that normally get a bit more traction and a bit more support from burners, because despite the impression that everyone's got pots of money lying around, particularly in the current environment, I don't necessarily believe that that's the case, but people will rally around a cause or a project that they believe in. And I think, yeah, you know, so we see lots of different projects pop up, and I'm not highlighting this project as being good or bad. We're just seeing these kind of fund starters or GoFundMes or whatever pop up the whole time. And so there's all these projects, and so sometimes people fundraise, they raise a bit, and then they don't get enough to finish the project. So then what happens? Are you just going to sit on the money? Are you going to spend it on something else? How's that going to go? So it's really important that if you've built a bit of a following, and you've got support for your project and people have put their hard-earned money in to your project, that you let them know how it's going, even if the news isn't necessarily good news, because otherwise it raises questions about intentions, you know. And that's also the important thing with clean books, just as like with any camp or artwork, you know, we unfortunately have to have these kind of default world behaviors to make sure that it meets up to our principles. And what we see is people are like, oh, I'm doing this thing and I'm raising it for me, and I'm going to give some to the dog's home down the road, or the three-legged cat home. But we don't necessarily know that that's happened. And so you might be able to extract 100,000 Rand out of Lexy because she thinks it's going to the three-legged cat home, but you've got to kind of follow through with that, otherwise it can be a bit disingenuous. And also when people are offering rewards or incentives, again, just be very careful with those kind of gifts and stuff. And again, this is a good example because someone contacted us before a fundraiser saying, oh, they wanted to offer some magic Tanqua dust as a reward for their thing. And it was like, oh, it's a difficult one. There's a lot of dust in the Tanqua. But because of our Leave No Trace at Kwaggafontein and our responsibility there to the environment, to the surroundings, you know, we don't want people taking mementos from the thing. So yes, you could take some dust from the R355 that no one would know about, but if you're selling it as Tanqua dust, then people will still believe it's Tanqua dust, and it's okay to take things from Tanqua Town. So we could take the idea and discuss it as a group between us and the project, and have a really nice open discussion about it. I could bounce it off other people within our team and other members. What do you think of this? I don't know how, I'm not too sure about it. You know, that's the joy of our job, is we get asked these questions that we never really knew we'd need to think about. But in the end, we agreed with the project itself that offering Tanqua dust was not a good idea and not to be encouraged, but they were able to recalibrate and do that. So it was much easier for us to work with them rather than after they'd spent hours putting all these rewards and everything together to then turn around and say, oh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to change that. Excuse me. So here's another one. So this is like, again, I'm not singling this out because it's good or bad. I'm just saying that these are projects that are out there. And so here's an interesting one, a great idea. We published this in the newsletter. It went out on socials in December. They're fundraising to bring this truck to gift ice cream in the desert. Everyone's like, oh, that's really cool. But their fundraising campaign, beyond the stuff we shared, I don't know how it's going. There might be other channels. They might have got a friend to give them 230,000 Rand and the thing's almost entirely fully funded. We don't know that. But it will be interesting, particularly for those 5 people who have put money into the project and backed it, what happens in 10 days' time when their campaign ends. And if the project will happen, if not, they might say, listen, we were unable to raise the funds this year, but we're going to put it in a lovely secure account and we're going to do it better next year. And I'm going to bring you lick and dab next year, come hell or high water. That's cool. That's an acceptable thing because not everything works out, but you have to be transparent about it. You can't just kind of disappear. You'd be like, oh yeah, I helped support that project and I don't see it anywhere, or what's happening and someone's just disappeared is not how things are done within our community. And again, that's not to say that Lick and Dab are doing that, will do that. It's just an example. They're very nice people. We've chatted to them. We want to see them bring this truck full of ice cream to the desert. There's lots and lots of club nights. People seem to think that that's what everyone wants. It's pretty good if you're a sound camp, but it does get a bit oversaturated with those kind of things. So you find that, you know, there's 10 different disco nights to go to within the community, and that's it. That's really your options as a fundraiser, or you just got to pay money into a thing. So again, just kind of be wary of that. Again, consider your time investment. You know, they can be distracting from your actual creative project, the thing you want to do. It's important that you feel you can ask for stuff and things and not just money to get stuff and things. You know, there might be people out there who have access to materials or labor that you need or you would be paying for anyway or investing in, and you can ask the community to help you with all sorts of things, not just money. And what is also quite nice is that after AfrikaBurn, there's a bit of a vacuum afterwards. And so what is sometimes quite nice is to kind of fundraise for specific things that you might not have covered in your budget afterwards. And then people who would have engaged with you, let's say it's, what was it, Milliways, the karaoke place, maybe all their microphones got damaged after Faisal was singing his high notes and they need to fundraise to get more microphones for next year. Definitely, I'm in for that because I had a bit of karaoke with it, I enjoyed it. So I'm more likely to support it after the event, after I've engaged with it. A lot of people also want to go towards lotteries and raffles. They're really heavily regulated in South Africa, and they actively seek out, like, the most efficient government body within South Africa is the Lotteries and Commissions Board, and they really are looking for the next victim to slap on the wrist. So just be really careful with that. And again, with prize draws, I struggle with it from a principled perspective because there's normally just one winner and loads of losers. And at Tanquetown, everyone should feel like they're a winner. So it's always, you know, approaching fundraising from a scarcity mindset is always challenging from our perspective, but we're not the ones fundraising. So we'll always just kind of guide and support rather than tell you what to do. You might have a brilliant idea for a prize draw. Go for it. You know, we'll never really say no unless it's illegal. So here's a few examples. Space Cowboys, prolific fundraisers with their events, a great crew, love them to bits. And through dialogue with them, they were doing their fundraiser and they sent this through and we were like, oh, actually, it says join Space Cowboys for an AfrikaBurn retro sci-fi fundraiser party. We can't have that because it makes it sound like you're raising money for us, for AfrikaBurn, and all the money on the door is going to come to us. And then they had the district where the thing was being hosted and the Quicket logo. And again, with us, we talk about using Quicket as our ticketing provider as AfrikaBurn to stop people getting scammed, but we very actively don't promote it as a business or have any Quicket branding on anything AfrikaBurn does. And we expect that to be the same for the projects that we work with. No one kind of gets a free ride just because they happen to be our ticketing provider. But then they popped this one back. Brilliant. I can share that on AfrikaBurn channels, the one on the left, dead easily. And is it any more or less effective? I would say no. It's just a slightly clearer piece of communications. And so then the writing's also important. So the original text had dance to global beats and contribute to our theme camp's mission in supporting AfrikaBurn. It's more than a party. It's a journey through space and time. But again, that was like, oh, that sounds like the whole thing is about supporting AfrikaBurn and that you're fundraising for us. So again, you know, just a simple change, it might seem insignificant or it might seem a bit nitpicky to anyone else. But for us, it's just really important that people know that they're going to be dancing through the night to global beats to support the Space Cowboys, not to support AfrikaBurn. And there's loads of great fundraisers and that they all, you know, they all have their thing. The Steampunk Saloon snuck in Honey Dora, the bar brand there, but we didn't post that. We cut her off at the knees when we shared it. A lot of them, you know, we'll just try work with whatever you've got and there's a dialogue between us. But as far in terms of building your project brand, there's absolutely no problems with that. Here's a nice one that's coming up. Mutant Burn Josie. Wow, it looks very cool as an event. It's coming up the end of Feb. We recommend you get tickets. Again, those brands are project brands. They're not commercial brands, so we don't have an issue with the Garden of Whedon branding their project. Here's another nice fundraiser that we really like. It's the Art Appreciation Society. Again, they had life drawing pop-up studios as fundraisers, and you bought a ticket, and it was just a really nice kind of way to use art and something different, still an event, to fundraise, you know, off a smaller audience, but also tell a story about art, build up a community around them. And yeah, this was definitely a fundraiser project that I personally thought was pretty cool. When it comes to Mutant Burn with the text, again, there's always, it's a subjective medium. There's things where we might, if I was writing it, I would write it slightly differently, but I'm not a policeman. You can, you know, 99 times out of 100, you can write it how you want. You know, again, it's really nice that it's so clear that it's for the favorite Joburg based AfrikaBurn camps, featuring an incredible lineup of AfrikaBurn DJs. That's a bit iffy because they're not AfrikaBurn DJs. There's no such thing as an AfrikaBurn DJ. I understand why, because who wouldn't want to listen to someone who's DJ'd at AfrikaBurn? It's a bit iffy, but it's not exactly a killer deal. Again, really nice. A lot of people will always try and weave into their story that they're trying to do good or give back, and it's really nice. A percentage of ticket sales will go to charities chosen by our camps, ensuring that the spirit of gifting and generosity thrives. That's really lovely as an idea, but when you say percentage, what, 0.5%, 20%? To what charity? Who chose them? Is the charity your charity that you run? Is it Lexy's charity? You know, you've just got to be really careful with this stuff so that no one comes along and is like, why did you do this? You know, because invariably, if they're unsure of it or they feel that they've been taken advantage of or compromised, then they'll come and also have a moan at us as well. And so fully encourage all of the things here. I think it's great, but just be very careful when you say you're going to do something to be super clear about it, so no one can come along later and say, oh, well, Mutant Burn said they were going to give, you know, make a huge donation to my book charity, and they never did. And then it's like, oh, you know, well, that's not them. They're the nicest guys in the world. We love them to bits. They would never do that. But you don't want people to exploit those gaps. So we would always recommend just be super careful and super clear about where things are going and what they're going to. Again, we're always here to help. You know, again, our role is to support the AfrikaBurn community. There's the comms at afrikaburn.com, or we get the info at, or you can mail us directly-ish. I think if you can find our emails on the website, or through Lexy or the WhatsApp groups, we are eminently reachable, and we're very happy to help. There's also the link. If you go on the website, you can click to submit an article, and that's when you make a submission to the Bardskirden newsletter, and that kind of forces you to put your image, your text, your headline and everything into one piece. And that's a really good place to start when you want to tell us about your project, and that then we would take that and then we put it in the newsletter, and then we'd use it for a social media post, and we'd use it throughout all of our channels. That's always a kind of good place to start, because sometimes, you know, if you email me or send it through, you might send me an image, but then not the text or not the headline and stuff. And then I have to either make it up and potentially get it wrong, or chase you for it, which normally takes me longer than it should if we're busy. If you don't feel you're getting recognized or getting promoted as much as you want, don't be afraid to nudge us and say, hey, I submitted that thing. I saw you posted it once. I've got a bit of interest. Would you mind posting it again? I don't mind that at all. It's easier to ask than not. And we'll always be honest with you and be like, no, it's really busy. You know, like with the Space Cowboys guys, they're always well ahead of the game, super organized, and they send stuff through like 2 months before, but nobody in Cape Town books a ticket for anything less than a week before. So I will always stall their messages till the week or so before and then do a reminder the day before so that I can try and help them get as many people as possible to their fundraiser, because I know if I post it 2 months before, everyone will have forgotten about it by the time it comes around. The next one is the WTF guide. I'm going to try to speed up. So this is obviously, when we're on the ground in Tanquetown, the main source of information about your creative project. You know everything about your project. You've been living with it for however long, years in some cases, and you know it intimately. But a lot of people don't know anything about your project. And so what we really encourage, and all the various portfolio leads will be in touch with you about your WTF submissions, is that the kind of more effort you put into your entry, the more likely people will engage with your project. And it's not an easy task, because we only give you about 50 to 60 words to explain it as well when you've been working on it for years. And, you know, this is obviously the sandfish artwork. You know, we get a lot of WTF entries that describe what you can see anyway when you're there. They don't add anything to it. You know, if the WTF entry is wooden puppets that look like fish, great. I can see that when I see the sandfish in Tanquetown. That's not really helping me as a viewer or as a participant to engage with the creative project. But luckily, they wrote a really nice WTF entry, and it was helped us understand that the Clan William sandfish is facing extinction, and that was the inspiration. I was like, oh wow, they're not just big puppets that look like fish. They are big puppets that look like fish, but they're telling a story about an endangered species in the Tanqua Karoo, which was really cool. And so it was really nice to have a WTF entry like that, because then you would look out for it. So again, your portfolio leads will communicate with you about the WTF entries, but I strongly recommend that you imagine that someone just walks across or encounters your project for the first time, and what you would want to tell them without being there, that they might not necessarily know or understand. There's an extra opportunity this year that's my pet project, and that's this amazing piece of software that was gifted to us by BMIR, Burning Man Radio, that is a automation software. And I don't know if anyone listens to Burning Man Radio when the event is on. We listen to it a lot because we obviously can't be there, but it paints the most kind of fantastic picture of what it's really like within Black Rock City. And you hear about all the different projects and artworks and happenings and stuff, and it's really exciting. And so what's happening this year is, with automation, we've got these kind of blocks of promos, or ads is a terrible word, but that's essentially what they are, for the creative projects running every 20-30 minutes. And so the invitation is for all projects to then kind of pre-record material. It can be something as simple as a WhatsApp voice note, you know, hey, come down to Space Cowboys after sunset and we'll blow your mind, to professional audio if you've got friends in the business or whatever. And so then these will then be loaded up and then broadcast throughout the event, which will be a really nice opportunity to get engagement with your projects while they're in Tanquetown. We're going to set up a recording booth at the volunteer days at the Junction Hotel, not this first one coming up, but the ones after. And then you'll be able to just come in and record your thing, and we'll help you put them together and add the bells and whistles, and then they'll be loaded up onto the playlist, and then they'll be in rotation throughout the event. And that offer also then extends during the course of the event. You know, when it comes to the most recent information about projects or opportunities or happenings, we're lucky enough that there's no other media, so people are forced to listen to our terrible radio station. But you can come in and give updates, and so we get lots of people coming in. Petit Paris, we're doing sunset drinks at 5 o'clock. Bring your stripy shirts and berets, and we'll see you then. You know, those kind of things can then go into the rotation for the day and get your projects out there. And really, yeah, we just want you to get as much engagement and as much participation as you want for your projects. And that's it. So yeah, I don't know if there's any questions. Stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was awesome. Does anybody have a question? Just like raise your hand or put it in the chat if you have anything you want to discuss or talk about.
Vish said, great session. Thanks, Brian and team.